Yeah, that's fine. Okay, brilliant. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for Kate and Michael for joining us today. So just to explain what today's webinar is all about, we are really focusing on working in South Africa. So as a doctor, who actually did work in South Africa in 2010 to 2012, you know, it was the best 2 years of my professional career, and actually it started a really interesting journey and the pre-birth of Medic Footprint, so to speak, simply because of the really amazing, diverse, challenging experience that I had in South Africa, but also because of the amazing work-life balance, and I just fell in love with the outdoors there too. It was an amazing 2 years of my life. So we're really lucky to have Michael and Katie, who have also had their own experience in South Africa, and they're going to share their story with us. So hello, guys.
Hi. Hello.
Great. So just to give an overview, we've also got, so actually I'll quickly mention that if you're interested in going to South Africa, this webinar has been kindly supported by Africa Health Placements, who are an NGO that support doctors who are looking to go and work in South Africa in various hospitals. So that's how I got there, and I'm sure the same is for Michael and Katie. So let's start with Michael. Just briefly introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Michael Mackenzie. Basically, I work in infectious diseases and general medicine, or acute medicine, whatever you want to call that. I'm a consultant now. I went to South Africa about 10 years ago to pursue and treat and cure all those infections. And I've picked up lots of experience, and I've been able to take what I've learned there and put it back into good use here. And I work up in Scotland, based in Edinburgh.
Brilliant. And Kate, or was it Katie? Sorry.
Either is fine. So I'm a core medical trainee. I'm working in Edinburgh, and I went to South Africa after my foundation training. And worked there for 1.5 years.
Okay, brilliant. So how far post South Africa are you now?
So I came back from South Africa 1 year ago, but I stopped working about 1 year before that, but had some traveling afterwards.
Okay, brilliant. All right, so what we're going to do is to find out a little bit more about our audience today. So before we actually start with the presentation, so question is, why have you joined this webinar? So should we just start the poll? General curiosity, I'm thinking about applying for roles in South Africa. Do you start working in South Africa? I'm working or have already worked in South Africa, or I'm interested in roles in Africa in general. So please feel free to vote now. Okay. Getting anything through?
Yeah. Trying the poll. Trying the poll.
Okay.
End the poll.
Okay, let's end the poll. So some people are saying I'm working or have worked in South Africa, and we didn't. And then we've got, I'm thinking about applying for roles in South Africa, and I'm due to start working in South Africa. So okay, brilliant. Right, so let's start with Mike's journey. So this is not Mike, clearly, but we're going to be sharing some pictures in the background. And actually, what we should do is, what I'm going to do is stop sharing the screen, and we can then see Mike and listen to his story. So tell me more about your experience.
Oh wow, okay. Well, I mean, I suppose South Africa for me was 2007 to 2010, so that's a decade ago. And I'd heard a little bit about South Africa. I just come out of medical school. I'd done a couple of years in working in the UK in old-fashioned kind of job titles, senior house officer roles. But I was really quite interested in trying to do infectious diseases, and I was interested really in, I guess, trying to use the medical degree and to make some big impact. And I think I'd heard about the trouble in South Africa with with HIV, TB, and I'd learned at medical school about the treatments that were coming online in the mid-90s, just as I was going to medical school, that could treat HIV very successfully and transform it from a sort of a deadly, universally deadly disease, something that would give people normal life expectancy nowadays. So it was an exciting time, an exciting opportunity for me to get my teeth in, get involved with something that was happening in South Africa at that time.
Was it quite difficult to actually? How did you decide where you were going to work in South Africa? Because obviously it's quite a big place.
Well, yeah, it was a funny one. Certainly an unusual situation there for me in terms of the South African experience, in that I got flung out to a big city. So certainly Katie will tell you about a rural experience in South Africa, in KwaZulu-Natal. I had I didn't come as a single person. I came with another person, with my girlfriend then and my wife now, Jessica, who's a journalist, and AHP did a really good job of accommodating her as well as me to find me a sort of urban placement. So I went to the mother city, as they call it, Cape Town. And if you've ever been to Cape Town, I was working in the township right behind the airport there, and that was called Delft. It was really big township, and I was working in General Hospital in the HIV clinic there. But that's a very unusual thing. I was a township doctor, but most of the doctors will go into rural placements, but they were very accommodating for my particular need, as it were.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so tell me more about what were the key memorable experiences that you had whilst you were there from a clinical perspective? Like, what did you learn?
Yeah. So what did I learn? So I learned certainly about the importance of kind of culture in medicine, that kind of anthropology perspective, in terms of there was an awful lot to learn about how people lived life, the sort of the good and the bad in South Africa. So what life was like for people who lived in the townships there, and how that sort of influenced their health. So that was by far and away the biggest thing. But and that was fun to learn all about a different place. How people live their lives, what's the same and what's different languages, and how people kind of what education they've had, how they understand health, and the key role that plays. And now I notice that when I go from one city to the next in Scotland, which is a tiny country, or one suburb to the next, you notice how the culture influences the health. And that was a massive lesson from South Africa. But there's all sorts of acute situations you could learn about, emergency presentations. There's so many emergency presentations. There's a lot of infection. You can learn how to work with low resource, just using using the basics of medicine to good effect. So there was many learning opportunities, but the number one was how culture and health kind of interface.
Okay, well, thank you very much for sharing that. I was going to go on to Kate as well. Sorry, I put Kate on mute just for a little bit, just because it was coming up. So Kate, are you there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Yeah, so do you want to give us an overview of how you ended up in South Africa?
Yeah, no problem. So I had finished foundation years and I just really wasn't quite sure what I'd wanted to do. I know I didn't want to go straight into training and wanted to see something different. Thought I wanted to go abroad, see a different culture, but just didn't fancy the standard Australia or New Zealand. So it sort of looked around for other options. And a couple of people who had gone to my school had been to South Africa. So I'd sent them a message and they really highly recommended it. And I got in touch with AHP and the ball sort of rolled from there. After foundation, before I went, I did the tropical medicine diploma in Liverpool. And again, more people who were there had been or were planning to go, and that sort of sedimented it in my head that it would be something I should do. So yeah.
And actually going back to the tropical medicine diploma, because I know a lot of doctors think it's something they should do before they go out. How useful was it compared to say diploma and going out there?
It was useful. I think if you didn't, I was lucky enough to have done a job in ID and had a little bit of exposure with HIV and TB. I think if you hadn't done that, it would be very useful. It is a very expensive thing to do now, and I think that does need to be considered. But I had sort of budgeted for that. You learn fast. Like, there's so much of it where you'll be working, and the doctors you'll work with will be very experienced that they will teach you. But yeah, it is worth it, I think, but depends on financial situation.
Sorry, Mike, you can see we saw you moving around there.
Oh yeah, sorry, I had to do. There was some problem there.
Okay, brilliant. So why don't we move on to so Mike, earlier you were saying, what kind of emergencies exactly did you deal with, like the worst emergency you could think of?
Yeah, I mean, well, the pediatric stuff is really the thing. I'm really pleased I got the chance to do like pediatrics, and that would be a big difference from the pediatric experience you get in the UK. Really hands-on. I know a lot of the junior doctors who work in pediatrics, they'll be writing notes and they'll be doing discharge letters and really kept away from patients. And this is the opposite. Really, they're short on doctors there in South Africa, so they don't have enough people to look after all the different pediatric cases. And
because I was also going to say the kind of things that I saw when I was out there included snake bites, a lot of porridge burns or hot water burns, particularly in pediatric children, as well as TB. Did you see any of that when you were out there?
Yeah, I mean, not so much snake bites, but certainly the burns. But the overwhelming thing was really sort of what they would say vaccine preventable. So diarrhea, rotavirus, with profound dehydration, very acidotic people who are so resilient, their pH will dip to below 7, and then treatment, and then it'll come back from that, and kind of pneumonia and respiratory illnesses as well, and do all of the practical stuff, getting the IV access, doing the treatment right, and observing them. It's really gave me a huge respect for paediatrics, but it's really great to see you just give basic treatment for kids to turn around like that. And you wouldn't really get, you don't, and you can't get an experience of that in the UK. So it was taught me the importance really about getting the basics right, just really hydration, oxygenation, just and checking your patient again, how they're getting on, checking back on them. So that's the number one thing in terms of a generic experience for me would be the peds.
And how about you, Katie? Sorry, how about you, Katie? How about your experiences with any acute situations you remember?
Yeah, well, I was a bit more rural than Mike, so I did see quite a few snake bites where I was, and a lot of burns in children. And you just get such an exposure to everything. You have to sort of become competent in lots of different things. Like, you'll have to do spinal anesthetics unless you're doing the surgery yourself. You had to do intubations if people came in that needed that, so you learned to do that. Little mini surgeries you could do. Acute emergencies, I remember a neurotoxic snake bite. That was pretty scary. A lot of trauma. Where I was, there wasn't that many guns, but there was lots of knives. There was one guy who'd been axed down the center of his head. I remember very clearly. Whose eye had come out, and we couldn't get him transferred because it wasn't considered an emergency. Lots of interesting stuff.
Which hospital were you in?
Clarissa.
Clarissa. So I was in Ngualazan, so it was like, yeah. So it was kind of nearby, so we may have not accepted your referral.
Yep, it was you guys.
But I do remember I saw someone with a machete in his head that his girlfriend put there when he was sleeping. And took it out. So it might have been the same person, who knows?
Yeah.
So
I remember those trauma presentations, and the funny thing in terms of the culture there was that it was the same as the violence that happens here. Like the violence there happens after the big football matches, and people, and they do that, the Kaiser Chiefs and the Land of Pirates, and it's the same here. And I remember quite well those kind of knife injuries, and sad really, but it's the same stuff. It's after people get drink, they watch football, they get violent. That's a similarity, and it's unfortunate. I remember quite clearly there was a guy in Cape Town with a piece of metal in his chest, in his sternum, and I had no idea what that was. It was like it looked like a piece of a car or something like that, and he said somebody got him with this.
Car?
It was just like a big rectangle of metal, but maybe like the size of a spade, and it was buried in his sternum. And I remember I got to cardiothoracic in the big hospital in Cape Town, put to skier, and the guy said, why don't you just try and pull it out? And I said, no thank you, why don't I transfer him to you, and you can pull it out in a nice big operating theatre with intensive care next door. And he did that actually. So you get those kind of challenging situations like you do here, but just a little bit different, maybe in magnitude of scale. And you call upon those kind of, I don't know if it's true, but that I have this, but common sense factors really. What's the situation? What's the best thing to do? Somebody tells you maybe a thing you're not comfortable with it, then you push back and say, I don't like that plan. We need another plan. South Africans like to make a plan. We say that all the time. So, So,
just to add to your stories, actually, for those of you who may be coming from a surgical background, I went to South Africa after core surgical training. And I'm glad I actually went after core surgical training rather than after my foundation years. Because maybe because of the knowledge that I gained from surgery and a bit of practical skills. But realistically, after my core surgical training, I could just about do an appendicectomy. But after a few months in South Africa, I was doing laparotomies, bowel resections, amputations pretty much every day, debridements, a whole range of different things. It was amazing, and it's very general when it comes to general surgery. So you're doing ENT, you're doing breast, you're doing pretty much everything. A lot of emergencies, a lot of gunshots and stabbings, road traffic accidents, burns, the very acute stuff, and also the very bad sepsis. So I don't know about you guys, but we'd see, very bad diabetes, basically. So very gangrenous feet. I remember seeing someone with breast cancer who had maggots in her breast. All very kind of very late stage conditions, which you really don't see in the UK. And obviously the treatment is different. So obviously, I mean, where you were, Mike, in Cape Town, did you have much of an issue with language barrier? Because in Zululand, that was quite a big thing.
Yeah, I mean, it feeds into the cultural aspect. That I kind of, well, somebody told me, don't try to learn a language. People will find that insulting, but I didn't really believe that, and I found the opposite to be true. So the nurses were very helpful in translating, but I tried to pick up the Xhosa language, the Xhosa language, and can't as well, and it's a multilingual nation in that.
Yes.
But so people have some English. A lot of people have got perfect English, better than I. But then other people don't speak the languages, so just another challenge. And I found like basically like word a day approach. I used to have a little challenge in clinic, learn a new word a day, and try and remember that. And I sort of built up my vocabulary, built up an understanding. But actually, I know, but I'm also pretty good at pidgin now, having. You'll UK anywhere from all around the world, so you need to use body language and different things to make yourself understood. So, and that was
How
a good.
about yourself, Katie, with the language in Zululand?
Yeah.
Did you learn?
No, not really. Any of my patients spoke English. It would be very rare to get someone who spoke enough English to have a consultation with. You relied a lot on the nurses. Medical students I found very helpful. Some of the medical students from the Zululand University, you just grab one, be like, you're my translator today, because the nurses could be quite busy, which was difficult, but also the language that the people used is, even with translated, they sort of don't present in the same way we would. It was all a lot more general complaints. Right-sided body pain was the most common one. So even once you get across the fact you're speaking in different language, there's still a lot of cultural differences in how people describe symptoms.
Yes, and very, very much so. It was exactly how you described it. And even when they're translating, it wasn't very helpful, I found, on some occasions at least. We actually had a Zulu lesson, I remember, quite early on when I started working there. And I did understand bits of Zulu. And I thought that was really important because I don't know about you, but I found that nurses wouldn't always accurately translate what the person said. You may not know if you didn't understand Zulu. But I could tell towards the end that, someone said something and the nurse told you something different. I could tell the difference.
It was the same with us. I find the medical students were the most reliable translators. That's why I kept them.
Yes, exactly. And tell us, so, I mean, let's move on to like the work-life balance. How was that for both of you? Let's start with Katie.
Oh, that was amazing, and it's why I'm struggling now as a core medical trainee. Why don't I have a weekend to go on safari this weekend? I find it great. Every hospital does rotas slightly differently, but where I worked, you could kind of choose if you wanted to work weekends or not. So I chose to do all my on-calls during the week, and then it meant I had every weekend off. I think in the year and a half I worked there, I worked like 4 or something. So every weekend you could go away. Everything's a bit more flexible. So if you wanted to leave early on a Friday, you could just go into work a bit earlier. Like, that's fine. So almost every weekend we went away somewhere. A lot of where I was living, there's a lot of safari options. You weren't that far from Mozambique to go diving or to the beach. You could easily get a plane to Cape Town or Joburg if you wanted to go sit in a wine land and drink some wine. Like, it was really amazing. And a great thing, which I hadn't been totally unaware of until I got my first paycheck, was you get loads of money. So you can actually do that very easily.
Yes, so I completely concur with you, because I went to South Africa with not much money, to be honest. I'm not sure how I would have financially survived, and I wasn't expecting much of a salary at all. My biggest expense actually was buying a car in South Africa, which was the equivalent of £6,000. Was quite cheap, because the cars in South Africa are actually very expensive, and most of them are relatively old for what you can get. Most people are driving around bakkies, which are like, for people that don't know what bakkies are, they're like, I don't know how to describe it, guys. What's a bakkie?
It's like a pickup, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like a pickup truck.
Yeah.
So most people be driving those. But I had my little kind of sedan. But yeah, I got my first paycheck and I was like, whoa, that's amazing. Because especially if you work outside of the cities, you get a rural allowance, which is fairly substantial. So I found that, I could live and work very comfortably and enjoy like UKT, traveling around the country, going to Mozambique, going to Botswana, going to Namibia, and also had money to send back home to pay off my student loan. At the end of that, yeah, I know people that saved up for mortgages and they're out there. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I had and it was my experience would be pretty out of date there, but it was the work-life balance for me was that I got to be in a really great place, and I think the conditions were slightly different where I was. There was quite a lot of hours there, probably comparable to here, but the overnight on calls were quite a bit more frequent, I think. But I got this great place to live. The cultural experience was second to none, and going around South Africa was a joy. I don't know, like South Africa is like the size of Western Europe, I think, and it's like so many countries rolled into one, and probably just not enough time there. Really, that was the main thing. To get around. I've been back since I did my honeymoon there. It was great. I liked it so much, and still scratch the surface. So maybe I'll go back and work. Maybe I'll go back there and work.
So, for both of you, what skills did you gain? Obviously, returning to the UK, how was your experience in South Africa viewed? What skills did you realise that you had gained that you could do more of than you couldn't do before?
Well, I think I was viewed. It's one of these things they always say, oh, you can't take time out. But I only applied for core medical training. But in the interview part where you have to talk about what you've done, I basically only talked about South Africa, and they seemed to like it, and it went fine. So I don't think it is viewed as negatively as perhaps people say. And actually, there's so many opportunities you can do there to make your CV better. So you can make it viewed positively. And in real terms, you become so much better. One, like, you're a lot lower stress in the UK. I mean, someone would have to be pretty sick for me to get stressed out about it now. You just learn to be calm and sort of problem solving things, because you don't have everything available and there's not scans available. You can't get people transferred, and you don't have someone to ask. You sort of have to learn how to solve problems by yourself and deal with things by yourself, which I think does really help when you come back. And so I just started doing like med reg shifts and stuff, and I think I'm overall finding it a lot easier than other people, just because I've sort of been in that situation before where you are the person who has to answer everything. And there's so many different skills other than that, practical skills, lots of different things. You can do almost any procedure you want there. And yeah, I think overall it does make you much better.
Yeah, so what are your thoughts, Mike?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think certainly, obviously, like that, you build up that sort of independence in your practice. You just don't really get the chance to do at a junior level in the UK, say. Certainly, I'm sure the first few weeks and months really were quite challenging for Katie. They certainly were for me, just to really build up that experience involves just, you know, doing things yourself, relying on others where you could, but basically that decision making, taking that responsibility, which you don't often get the chance to do at junior level in the UK. So that just really fast forwards you in that role. And I mean, there was different things I did, certainly in different practical things I did in South Africa, but I think the main thing was that getting that sort of comfort, well, never entirely comfortable to take full responsibility of someone else, but certainly it's easier to do so when you've had an experience like a resource limited setting like South Africa. And I also got a bit of chance to do, basically just take on and run my own. There was other people there, but I was the sort of chief medic at one of the HIV clinics there, a really big one, and so you're taking on more responsibility at a sort of earlier stage, doing your best, and I think that was good for me, and hopefully I did a good job there. And I just wouldn't have got that chance back in the UK at that stage. It would have taken decades to get to that stage. And we did a good job with the basics. So there's kind of, that's quite fashionable in the UK. We call that kind of like leadership skills, or like, you know, those leadership courses you need to do. But that was more like real life leadership rather than going to sort of seminars about it. You, by the fact that you're the only medic there, or only one there who knows what to do, you take a leadership role. So yeah, that was great growing and learning experience. Okay, brilliant. And finally, why don't we give an overview of how you actually, what the process was like, kind of applying to go and actually work in South Africa. So what did you need to get in order to get there, other than a flight ticket? So I think Katie's got probably more recent relevant experience. I can certainly tell you that my story, but that's kind of... Katie, why don't you give us an overview of your experience?
Yeah, so I'll be honest, it's quite long, and it's very bitty, and there's lots of stamps involved. But basically, start more in advance than you think you'll need, and then you have to get like various like transcripts from university, and to verify your qualification, and then you have to get stuff for a visa and a work permit and a job. But ultimately, AHP are really good for that. They sort of give you one thing at a time to do, and say, okay, go and get this and tell us when you're done, and then they tell you the next thing. So I just sort of went through it with them. I think now, from talking to Sally and Tracy, they were saying it's a lot faster than it was when I was doing it, because it took probably about a year for most of us to get all the paperwork done. But maybe Sally can verify that if it's a bit faster now. But basically, start early and get AHP to sort of keep you right.
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar situation where I actually wanted to go a few years earlier than I actually did. But because I didn't, I essentially had all the time in the world to go through the process. So I didn't really feel any pressure in the amount of time it took. But I know that other people that went out there at the same time as me, it did take, as you said, it took longer than they expected. So I think whoever is planning to go out there, it's just really important to just plan ahead and keep in contact with AHP, because they will walk you through every step and really support you with that. So yeah. I'd
like to ask a question. If that's okay.
Let's ask questions.
So although I'm going to, in interest of full disclosure, I'm the sole non-medic here, but I was fortunate enough to actually go and visit the region of South Africa with KZN and the hospital where Abeyna did her work for 2 years, which was very exciting. It was a general surgeon at the time, right?
Yeah.
And got a chance to meet several of the doctors and several surgeons who were doing this experience as well. So as a layperson, I still had the opportunity to go and get a sense of the community and kind of what it was like to dive into that adventure. And that's the impression I got, was, again, huge. I got the impression great at developing your skills, building confidence at tackling the unknown. But I guess what the other thing that came to me was a real sense of community amongst other people who were doing this experience alongside you. And Abeyna speaks with almost kind of, it speaks in a very special way, if you don't mind me saying, about the time that also the community of people, many of whom you're still in touch with. So I guess I'd love to hear a bit more about, that community. You obviously go off by yourself, but you quickly join a group. What was that like? So kind of a network of people, because some people have lived away from home and out country before. From people that might seem intimidating. So what's that like, that community that you might be joining?
Do you still have friends in South Africa? That's the question.
And if we start with Kate, then we move to Mark, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, well, actually, funny, 2 weeks ago, I had some friends from South Africa come up and stay with me in Edinburgh for the festival. It's amazing. So I went out by myself. I didn't know anyone who was going to KwaZulu-Natal. I knew a friend from Liverpool who was going to go to Eastern Cape. I didn't know anyone else, and he was going to be about 6 hours from me. But yeah, you meet amazing people, like the sort of type of people who want to do it, and probably anyone who's dialed in to listen. You know, they tend to be sort of similar, open-minded people, and I mean, great friends, and that's what makes it so nice, having all your weekends free. So you run into people from other hospitals because you sort of go to the same touristy spot, and you recognise people, and people all have connections and know someone from someone. And so we did quite a few big group things, but also just little things. And you can visit each other's hospitals. There's always like braais going on. My hospital, we had lots of like car wash parties where the local DJs would play, and people from the other hospitals would come to our car wash party. It was great. And yeah, as I said, I've kept in touch with almost all my good friends there, and still have some good friends living in South Africa. And I do need to go back and visit everyone.
Brilliant. How about you, Mike?
No, I mean, it's been a while now, but I guess the kind of taking it down to a deeper level, like a little bit. I think a lot of people who go to that part of the world hear about this concept, kind of this Ubuntu concept, and Ubuntu is really this word which means, roughly translated, a person is a person to other people. And it really, to me, that really was manifest in the way that people work together, and how they interact with each other. And of course, person-to-person interactions is key to health. So it really, all the interactions I had with people were positive. Any real cross words or nasty, particularly with colleagues and stuff. Now I've taken that back to sort of take that South African spirit back here.
Okay, sorry, for some reason I think we lost your connection. It was a bit bitty. Okay. Kate, so I think Kate, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, brilliant. So what we'll do now is, if anyone's got any questions, can you please post them in the Q&A box, which should be in your menu section. Owen, do you have any more questions?
Yeah, I do. So you've heard a lot about, obviously, how doing this experience takes you out of your comfort zone, and kind of it teaches you lots of things that you might not get to do in the UK. I guess my question is, what was the broader impact on your career coming back to the UK from having done this experience? So, for example, you talked about being more confident, kind of just being more problem solving and get on with it. But with any particular situations whereby when you came back to the UK, you walked into a situation that could well have thrown several other people. Maybe it did, other people you were with. And maybe, I'm not senior enough, I'm not ready, I haven't done this before. And actually you remember when afterwards thinking, that was because I went on this trip and I was in a situation 10 times where I shouldn't have been, but I was. And now I can walk into that room, hold my head up, and I don't know the exact answer, but I know I'm going to figure it out. Tell me about, that's a long way of saying, what was the impact of this experience on your broader career? That's the question.
Well, I mean, it took. Well, if I could go, I mean, I kind of there's like the real life stuff, like being a doctor, and I think Katie's mentioned it before that it would probably, you see more emergency presentations there in a day than you would perhaps in a month or 6 months in medicine in the UK. And they're more grave, the situations there. So it gives you that real confidence to deal with emergency situations and put it in context. Is this really a true emergency, or is this not? And that do I have some time here? And always better to use time to make a sort of more sensible decision than to do a rush thing. So I think it gives you like that. It will de-stress you in your work in the UK, having been out there. De-stress you, and also it's a good one for, as Katie's mentioned, in the sort of the not real world, I call it, like the kind of interview situation, the working situation. You can turn those experiences to your advantage in those kind of core medicals, registrar, consultant interviews in all sorts of ways, and usually that will give you something different from other people applying for those posts. So it's got a real impact, both in terms of your day-to-day and also your sort of career opportunities in the UK.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you. Is there any, and Kate, yeah, how about for yourself?
Yeah, so kind of what Michael said, like the sort of non-medical, just being able to handle emergency situations, and then also sort of little things. But one thing that comes to mind is in one of my first jobs was there was a big stress because somebody needed a lumbar puncture and the registrar wasn't there. And like in South Africa, you do 10 of those a day. I was like, I can do it. They're like, no, it's fine. You know, this will be a difficult person. Like, not a good one for you to practice on. I'm like, yeah, okay. I mean, I'm sure I've done more than whatever registrar you're going to call here. So little things like that. And sometimes people are a bit like, oh no, when I was in South Africa, it's like, have you used the same equipment? So some things like that, just little things that come up. But some things you just will never do. Like, for example, I ended up doing a bit of neonates. As to quote my medical manager, I said I don't want to do too much pediatrics as I've never done it before, but I was told, but you're a woman, you like babies. So I ended up doing neonates and having to intubate like neonates, really small babies, and that was terrifying. And I spoke to one of my friends who is a peds registrar and was like, oh, you know, like I remember doing it, it was really scary. And she hadn't actually even done it yet, and she's in her training because now it's so done mainly by like the anaesthetist and the consultants, but as a trainee in the specialty hadn't had the opportunity to do it, whereas that was just something, you know, working there, you're expected to learn, you're expected to have a broad knowledge, pediatrics, obs and gynae, surgery and medicine, like you've got to cover all of that when you're out of hours. So stuff like that.
Fantastic. It sounds, yeah, quite not faint-hearted, but that's brilliant. I just wanted, before we move on, like if I could throw that question to Abeyna as well, since of course you are an alumni of AHP, if that's okay.
Yes.
And you obviously moved from general surgery into occupational health as well. So I'm wondering, how did your experience, or if it did, impact your kind of evolution as a doctor and an entrepreneur as well?
I mean, I would say from the clinical perspective, going back to England in some ways is a bit of a culture shock. It was a culture shock getting there, and it's a culture shock getting back. Once you essentially, everything's been scared out of you, and you pretty much, you can deal with everything. And you know, as you both said, like there are a lot of times when you are the most senior person there, and you're expected to know the answers and make the decisions, and that's it. And you just got on with it. Whereas in the UK, there's a lot more cushioning. There's a lot more risk management, or much more risk averse, and you do less. So, I mean, as a junior doctor, so to speak, but even as a consultant, I would say consultants probably don't have half the experience that some of the junior doctors have when it comes to at least the emergencies, managing acute emergencies in South Africa. So yeah, I would say that the confidence to actually deal with pretty much anything was one thing I I definitely took back. Yes, just realizing that, you know, what emergencies are real emergencies and what really aren't. And then from the entrepreneurial perspective, I was very passionate about my own experience and actually enabling more doctors to have something similar, to actually step outside of the day-to-day medicine and explore other things, because medicine is very different throughout the world. I know the popular places tend to be Australia, New Zealand, which in my experience, if you're on the cities, it's pretty much very similar to the UK. Whereas if you go to South Africa, once you're out of the major cities, it really is a unique clinical experience where you really end up testing and pushing your clinical skills to the limit in a really positive way. You can genuinely help a lot of people and learn and share your experience and teach. And as Katie was saying, like, build a really interesting portfolio. So actually, when I was out there, I also published at least one, if not two papers, and did a bit of research too. So there's plenty to get involved in. I also set up my own projects. I did some outreach to some of the rural hospitals. I set up this whole emergency trauma triage thing. There were so many things that I did. I had the initiative to do and actually carry out because I was there, and because I felt like my skills were appreciated in that setting, so to speak. Yeah.
I think that's really, really important, Abeyna, that the thing you do get there is an opportunity to really, your skills are appreciated. You get an opportunity to do some really good work there, and that is the medical work, the surgical work, the treatments you give there are usually for very young people who don't have another doctor, they don't have another medical option, and they're really usually effective and can be very sort of vital, life-saving things you do quite often. And it's maybe not quite like that back here in the UK, where people are, it's a different society. People are elderly and frail, and you're maybe not quite clear about whether what you do will make a difference in the end. Whereas I'm sure who you were treating out there was young people who really were sick, and you could do something to help them, and there was no arguments, and you got to do that every day. And so for me, like, the sort of question that you asked there about what it did for me, but it's also really good. You get to say that you've made an awful lot of impact on an awful lot of people, and that's sort of an amplified experience you get in South Africa with respect to how you might have the experience you might have here, where things are a bit more murky and difficult. That's my personal opinion.
Brilliant, thank you. So I think we're actually now at the end of our webinar. Either of you, have you got any more comments to add before we close?
Oh, just to say thank you for having me, and it's a great place, South Africa. It seems like there's a great eye-opening thing that you're doing also, Abeyna, with Medic Footprints, and just to mention, it sounds great. And the other good people here, the Africa Healthcare Placements people, are basically just to mention them, because they will, if you do apply there, or you find you're going to go there, then they're a very supportive organisation and personable. So you'll have help. And thank you.
Yes, I mean, AHP were one of the first people I reached out to when I started Medic Footprint, simply because I thought it was really important to drive more doctors out to South Africa. So thanks. So I mean, the website is ahp.org.za. Katie.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. And I'm happy to speak to anyone if they've got any questions after listening to this after. You can send out my email address. But yeah, it was I really enjoyed it, and really miss it right now, especially when Edinburgh is already freezing. So yeah, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So just before we go, just to remind everyone, our next webinar is on this Thursday, Managing Ill Health at Work, a brutally honest guide for doctors. It's something that's really, really needed, especially there was a recent article that was released in the BBC about a doctor that actually, I know their family, who unfortunately took her own life last year. And as an occupational doctor, I think it's really important that doctors are aware of how to really support themselves when they're ill and what to know about the whole work ill health relationship. And then on the 10th of September, you were doing a masterclass.
Yes, I'll be joined by Sarah Sabin. We will be doing like a masterclass. Sounds very fancy. So we're going to get basically down and dirty with the CV, right? So we're going to work with people who are thinking about looking at non-medical careers. There's going to be a focus to an extent on management consultancy, because that's a very common area of interest. But it'd be for anyone who's a doctor who's also interested in looking at how do I make sure that my CV, which may be at the moment about 5 or 6 pages, I don't know, but it could be quite long.
10 or 20.
It could be quite long, and we're going to work with you to see, right, how do we make that sharp, shorter, and it's going to be really effective when it gets in front of a non-medical recruiter who wants to find the right person. So we really hope you'll join us. That's on the 10th of September, and we'll try and CV's never been so fun. We'll make it fun, and we'll get you what you need to know. Looking forward to it. Join us.
Thanks. And as you know, we're really building up to the online conference we have on the 13th of October, dcwonline.org. It's free. We've got several other webinars in the next few weeks leading up to this conference. So do check out the website. And thanks again to Michael and Katie. And we've got Sally, who's from AHP, in the background. We really appreciate you teeing up this webinar for this evening for our listeners. And this recording will be available for people to watch. We'll put it on our YouTube channel and share it around social media, and will likely be on our homepage for time to come. All right, well, have a great evening, everybody.
Thanks very much, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.